The judge looked into my eyes and said, "Here, God will not save you." I had 52 years of priesthood, 52 years helping young people get off drugs, hearing confessions, rebuilding lives, and in that moment, all of that was destroyed with a single word: guilty. But I did not commit the crime. Boston, 2016. A young woman from the community was found dead. The city went into a panic. And when a city is in panic, it does not seek the truth. It seeks a culprit. My name came up first in whispers, then in loud voices, then in the headlines. Priest under investigation for murder. In less than 24 hours, I went from being the priest who saved young people from trafficking to becoming the perfect suspect. What almost no one knew is that weeks before, some of those young people had made a courageous decision. They decided to leave crime behind. They were speaking out, revealing names, breaking silent agreements that were never meant to be broken, and I was by their side. That made me an obstacle. On the morning of my arrest, they knocked on the parish door at 6:40. I still had the rosary in my hand. I did not scream. I did not resist. I only saw in the eyes of the people around me something that hurt more than any accusation: doubt. During the trial, my defense tried to present the inconsistencies, timelines that did not match, contradictory testimonies, questions interrupted at the exact moment they could change everything. I realized at that moment that the case needed to be closed quickly, and I was the easiest path. When the judge finished reading the sentence, he paused, looked directly at me, and said with a calmness that chilled me to the bone, "Here, God will not save you." I did not reply. But in that instant, I knew that the greatest battle of my life would not be against the bars. It would be against something much more dangerous: despair. I was led out handcuffed through the main door in front of cameras, microphones, and faces I had known for decades. Some were shouting, others simply observed. That night, alone in the holding cell, I pressed my forehead against the cold wall and did the only thing left to me. I prayed. I did not ask for freedom. I did not ask for revenge. I asked not to harden my heart. I did not know at that moment that I would spend 8 years in prison. I did not know that one day the very judge who condemned me would be on his knees before his own conscience, and I did not know that the truth, buried, silenced, humiliated, was just waiting for the right moment. Prison is not like in the movies. It does not scream on the first day. It whispers. When the metal door closed behind me, the sound was not loud. It was definitive, as if the world outside had simply stopped existing. They took away my clerical collar. They took away my documents. They took away the small crucifix I had carried in my pocket for 30 years. An officer looked at it, then looked at me, and said with an ironic tone, "That won't help you in here." I did not respond. My cell had an iron bed, a thin mattress, and a small window, too high to see the sky. On the first night I could not sleep, not because I feared the other inmates, but because of the silence between one thought and another. I relived every second of the trial, every interruption, every averted gaze, every objection accepted too quickly, and the phrase came back as if it were etched into the walls: "Here, God will not save you." In the first days, the provocations began. Some inmates discovered that I was a priest. At first, they were subtle. Then, they became direct. "Where's your God now, priest?" I learned something important there. Responding did not lessen the pain. Silence sometimes was more powerful than any argument. It was on an ordinary morning, sweeping the hallway, that I met Joseph Murphy, scarred face, tired posture, a man who observed everything and spoke to no one, until the day he approached and asked, almost unconsciously, "Is it true that you still pray?" I said yes. He did not respond. He turned away and left. But that night, alone in the cell, my fingers began to move as if I were holding an invisible rosary. No beads, no object, just memory, just faith. Days later, Murphy returned. He said that his mother prayed for him when he was a child. He asked in a low voice, as if ashamed to ask, "Could you pray for her tonight?" I prayed. After Murphy, another man came, then another. None wanted a sermon. None wanted a theological explanation. They wanted silence. They wanted presence. They wanted someone who would not judge them for what they were. In the yard, we began to sit together. No books, no ceremony, no altar, just broken men trying to remember who they were before their mistakes. And I began to understand something that changed everything inside me. My priesthood had not been taken from me. It had merely been displaced. But while something silent was being reborn within those bars, another story was beginning outside. Judge William Harper did not yet know. But the sentence he believed had closed a case was about to open another, much bigger. Guard Michael Turner was a man of few words. 23 years in prison. He had seen it all. Nothing impressed him. He watched our group in the yard with suspicion, as if he expected the calm to hide something. But he could not ignore a simple fact. The wing where I was housed was the quietest in the prison. Conflicts had decreased. Provocations had lost their power. Even the toughest guards noticed that something had changed, without anyone being able to explain exactly what. On a night close to 11, Turner discreetly called me through the bars. I approached. He was silent for a few seconds, as if he were battling internally over whether to speak or not. Then he said, almost in a whisper, "My wife is sick." He didn't ask for a miracle. He didn't ask for an explanation. He just looked at me with the eyes of a man who had exhausted all other options. I asked her name, Catherine. That night, sitting on the cold floor of the cell, I offered every prayer for a woman I had never seen. I did not ask for healing. I asked for strength. I asked for peace. I asked that she not face the pain alone. Days later, Turner returned. He did not smile. That was not his type, but his eyes were different. He said that the tests showed unexpected improvement, something the doctors could not clearly explain. It was not definitive, but it was different from everything the previous prognosis indicated. He did not say anything more. He turned his back and left. But from that day on, something changed in the way he looked at me. Meanwhile, my legal attempts continued to fail. My lawyer, Daniel Foster, still believed in my innocence, but the doors were closed. Reopening the case would mean admitting serious failures, and no one wanted to do that. It was on a quiet dawn that I almost faltered. I leaned my head against the wall and quietly asked God what I had never asked aloud. Why? Why allow a lie to destroy everything? Why were the young people I tried to protect used to destroy me? Why did the truth seem so dead? The silence was long, but it was not empty, and in that moment I understood something that changed the way I faced each day that followed. My greatest battle was not to prove my innocence. It was not to allow injustice to turn me into someone bitter. I could lose my freedom, but I would not lose my heart. And while I learned this inside prison, outside, Judge William Harper was beginning to lose sleep, literally. Judge William Harper woke up every night at the same time, 3 hours and 12 minutes. It was not a clear nightmare, it was a feeling, an unease he could not name. He would go back to sleep, wake up at the same time, night after night. Then came the dreams. One night, clearer than the others, he found himself in front of a closed metal door. On the other side, someone remained silent. No accusation, no words, just presence. He ignored it. He attributed it to work stress. But the body does not forget what the mind tries to discard. Insomnia, high blood pressure, constant fatigue. The exams did not indicate anything serious, but he knew something was deeply wrong. It was then that, unable to explain even to himself why, he requested access to old court files. Under the pretext of an internal audit, among dozens of cases, he found mine. He opened it. He reread the testimonies with eyes different from those of 8 years ago. And this time, he saw. A testimony dismissed for lack of consistency directly contradicted the main accusation. Times that did not match. A crucial question interrupted at the very moment it could change the course of the trial. He himself had accepted that objection, without hesitation. Upon rereading the phrase he pronounced in that court, he felt a weight he had never felt before. Here, God will not save you. He slammed the case shut. That same night, the dream returned. The metal door was there again, but this time it was different. This time he realized he was kneeling before it, not out of obligation, out of inability to stand. He woke up sweating. For the first time in many years, he opened the Bible that had belonged to his mother. He wasn't seeking comfort. He was seeking silence. His eyes stopped on a sentence he had read dozens of times before, but had never felt this way. The truth will set you free. He could no longer ignore it. He called Thomas Reynolds, a retired investigator known for his integrity. He asked him to review his case from scratch, as if it had never been judged. No rush, no pressure. Reynolds agreed. In the following weeks, new interviews were conducted. Benjamin Carter, whose testimony had been minimized years earlier, was located. He reported that he had been intimidated into downplaying the strength of his account. He didn't point fingers directly, but admitted that there was fear involved, a lot of fear. Other inconsistencies emerged, and what the investigation began to reveal were not minor flaws, loose ends, forgotten details. It was a construction, rushed, intentional, fragile enough to collapse when someone truly looked at it. Meanwhile, I continued to know nothing. I went about my days behind bars, believing that perhaps my story would end there. But the truth was not dead. It was being examined, and this time there was no way to ignore it. The turning point came from where no one expected. Stephen Clark was gravely ill. He knew he didn't have much time, and perhaps because of that, or perhaps because some consciences only speak when the body begins to quiet, he asked to speak with someone from the justice system. In the presence of Judge William Harper himself, he made a formal statement. No drama, no speech. Just a tired man with the voice of someone who has carried too much weight for too long, admitting what had been done. The version used against me had been manipulated, built to protect the interests of local trafficking. The young people I tried to save were used as pawns, and I, who was next to them at the wrong time, became the perfect target. Clark confirmed in no uncertain terms, I was never involved in the murder. The sum of that confession and Reynolds's report made it impossible to maintain my conviction. The court reopened the case. On an ordinary morning, without warning, I was called to the prison's administrative room. The director read the preliminary decision in a monotone voice, as if he were reading any other bureaucratic document. My sentence was being annulled. 8 years later, I left prison at 60 years old. There were no applause. There were no cameras waiting for me with scripted redemption. There was no cinematic moment with music in the background. There was only fresh air on my face and a feeling that, to this day, I have not found the right words to describe. Judge William Harper asked to meet me in person. He entered the room with a demeanor unlike anything I had seen in that courtroom years before. There was no authority in that man at that moment. There was only a human being carrying the weight of what he had done. He didn't try to justify himself. He didn't present arguments. He didn't explain the pressures that existed at the time. He simply said, I failed. I looked at him for a few seconds, and I replied that forgiveness does not depend on perfection. It depends on recognition. I returned to the parish. Some walls were more worn, some pews empty. The structure bore the time that had passed, and so did I, but the altar was in the same place, and it was before it that I finally cried. Not out of relief, not out of anger. I cried for something I can only call gratitude, even after everything, perhaps especially after everything. Because I learned something inside those walls that no seminary, no book, no year of priesthood taught me in the same way. Human justice can err, power can rush, lies can seem strong for a long time, but the truth does not disappear. It can be buried, it can be silenced, it can be publicly humiliated and discarded as inconvenient, but it does not die. It waits, and when the time comes, it does not ask for permission. It simply stands up. If you've made it this far, I want to ask you a direct question. Are you trapped in something right now, not necessarily behind bars, but trapped in a situation that feels definitive, in an injustice that feels too great, in a silence that feels eternal? I spent 8 years believing that perhaps the truth would never come. It did come, in its own time, in its own way, more powerful than anything I could have planned alone. If this story has touched something in you, don't let it end here. Write the word truth in the comments and tell me which city you are watching from. I read, I see. And when I find people from such different places united by the same message, I remember that none of us are alone. If you are going through something difficult right now, also write I believe, not as a ritual, as a declaration. Because when the truth finds space, it blossoms. And when people come together around it, fear loses strength. Thank you for staying until the end. Here, we are family. Amen.